Weakness is not emotion, it's self-betrayal. Weakness is not the absence of strength, it's the presence of self-betrayal. Most people hear that and flinch, not because it's untrue, but because somewhere deep inside, they know they've done it. They've looked away from what they knew was right. They've nodded when they wanted to speak. They've smiled when something inside them screamed. And over time, those tiny betrayals became a way of life. We grow up thinking weakness means being too emotional or too sensitive. But emotion isn't the enemy. Emotion is human. What breaks us is not what we feel, but what we silence. The moment you swallow your truth to be accepted, the moment you dim your voice to be loved, the moment you deny what you need to protect what others expect, that's when weakness takes root. It doesn't storm in loudly. It creeps in quietly, one compromise at a time. We trade our honesty for comfort. We shrink our instincts to fit into spaces never meant for us. And we call that maturity, and we call it humility. We call it being a good person. But deep down, we know we've abandoned something vital, something raw, something real. Nietzsche never wrote for the ones who needed to be comforted. He didn't speak to the people waiting to be rescued. He spoke to the few who sensed something was missing in the way we're told to live. He spoke to the ones who knew that living politely often meant dying slowly. His idea of strength wasn't brute force, it wasn't cold dominance, it was alignment. Alignment with your instincts, alignment with your nature. Alignment with the fire inside you that refuses to be explained or excused. That fire doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't seek applause. It doesn't shrink when challenged. It stares back. It speaks truth. It walks away without guilt. And most people are terrified of that version of themselves. So they bury it, not because it's wrong, but because it's disruptive, because it might cost them comfort, or approval, or love that was always conditional. But here's the truth. The version of you that keeps the peace at all costs is not the real you. It's the edited version, the polished version. The version that has learned to survive in a world that rewards silence over sovereignty. And every time you let that version take control, you move further from your strength. Not because you don't have it, but because you've stopped choosing it. Self-betrayal becomes easier with repetition. At first it stings, then it numbs, then it becomes identity. Until one day you can't tell if what you're doing is kindness or compliance. You can't tell if what you're saying is truth or performance. You look in the mirror and the face is familiar, but the eyes are unsure. Hollow. Distant. That's not you being weak. That's you forgetting who you were before the world told you who to be. And Nietzsche would argue that forgetting is not innocent. It is a choice, a slow death, a surrender dressed up as stability. He believed that the human spirit dies not in a moment of defeat, but in the quiet compromise of our essence, day after day. So no, weakness is not crying. It's not needing help. It's not feeling lost. Weakness is knowing your truth and choosing not to live it. Weakness is betraying your deepest instincts just to be liked by people who don't even like themselves. Weakness is dressing your fear up as virtue and calling it wisdom. If you're feeling disconnected, tired, small, it's not because you lack strength. It's because you've spent too long denying it. It's buried, not broken, and it's waiting, not for motivation, not for validation, but for you to stop hiding. Because if strength was always inside you, if your instincts were never wrong, if your fire never left, then the real question is this. If you were not born weak, why did you become that way? And that question demands an answer, not from the world, from you. The modern world teaches you to be harmless. You weren't born harmless. You were trained to be. Somewhere along the way, the wild edge of your nature was softened, filed down, smoothed over. Not because it was dangerous to others, but because it was dangerous to systems that rely on predictability. From the moment you could walk and speak, you were taught to obey, not to think, not to challenge, just obey. School didn't teach you how to question. It taught you how to raise your hand and wait, how to ask for permission, how to sit for hours without moving, how to memorize and repeat. And if you followed those rules well enough, you were rewarded, not with truth but with approval. At home, you were praised when you were quiet, when you didn't ask too much, when you didn't push too far. Good boy, good girl. You weren't being loved for your essence. You were being loved for your compliance. You were being trained to believe that love had to be earned by shrinking. Then came the media. Stories that glorified suffering. Characters who were liked because they were soft, fragile, forgiving to a fault. And villains were always strong, assertive, clear. So you learned that to be accepted, you had to appear wounded. You had to be endlessly understanding even when you were being mistreated. You had to smile through disrespect and say thank you. You're so polite. You're so humble. You're so selfless. Those phrases sound like compliments, but they're not. They're warnings. They're signs that you've been successfully domesticated. Because when society says you're a good person, what it often means is you're no longer a threat. Nietzsche saw this. He saw how modern culture doesn't build strong individuals, it builds quiet citizens. He wrote, "The individual must struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe, not physically, psychologically, spiritually, emotionally. Because to belong to the tribe, you must think like the tribe. And to think like the tribe, you must kill the parts of you that don't fit." But here's the twist. The tribe doesn't love you. It tolerates you as long as you follow its unspoken rules. Be agreeable. Be nice. Don't challenge. Don't confront. Be soft. Be small. Be harmless. And if you dare to step outside that script, you will feel the pressure. You will feel the silence, the rejection, the cold distance from people who once clapped for your obedience. And so you return. You tuck your power away again. You learn the art of polite self-erasure. You become someone easy to be around, predictable, palatable, forgettable. But deep inside, something resists. A voice you've been ignoring grows louder. A tension builds between who you've become and who you were meant to be. And no amount of praise or validation can drown it out. Because you weren't meant to be harmless. You were meant to be precise, powerful, present, not violent, not cruel, but impossible to ignore. This isn't about becoming reckless. It's about remembering your edge, your boundaries, your ability to disrupt comfort with truth. And the world doesn't want that from you, and the world wants you polite, polished, and obedient. Because the moment you reclaim your strength, the systems that feed on your softness begin to starve. So if the world is constantly shaping you into something weaker, the question becomes painfully clear. Who benefits from your weakness? Who gains when you stay small? Who gets to keep control while you doubt yourself? And more importantly, why do you still let them? No one makes you weak. You learn to paralyze yourself. Weakness isn't something people do to you. It's something you've practiced, perfected, and repeated until it became second nature. You weren't forced into it. You were seduced, slowly, gently, Over time, you taught yourself how to be quiet when your voice trembled. You trained your body to flinch before conflict. You conditioned your mind to expect rejection before even trying. Not because you were born that way, but because the fear of being too much felt worse than the pain of being invisible. This is how self-sabotage begins, not with big failures, but with tiny decisions that erode your edge. You don't apply, you don't speak, you wait for a better moment that never comes. You rationalize, call it timing, call it humility, call it balance. But deep down, you're not waiting for clarity, you're waiting for permission, and it never comes. There's a name for this: learned helplessness. The belief that effort won't change anything. So you stop trying. You play small. You get really good at staying out of the way, and society rewards you for it. They call you low maintenance. They call you easygoing. But inside, you're shrinking, dimming, folding in on yourself. You weren't always like this. There was a time you moved without hesitation, a time you wanted things without shame, a time you felt worthy just for being alive. But that scared people. Your confidence made them uncomfortable. Your intensity made them defensive. So they projected their fear onto you. And instead of rejecting it, you absorbed it. You made their discomfort your guilt. You became less so they could feel more. And now you call that maturity. But it's not. It's fear, dressed up as wisdom. Nietzsche despised that kind of life. The life of knowing what must be done but doing nothing. The life of knowing you're meant for more, but settling for less. He didn't write for people who needed to be told what to do. He wrote for those who already knew, but lacked the fire to act. And he knew exactly where that fire went. It didn't vanish. It was buried. Buried under layers of approval-seeking, emotional suppression, and a lifetime of apologizing for your hunger. You don't need to become stronger. You are already strong. What you need is to stop hiding from that strength. Stop labeling your truth as arrogance. Stop calling your ambition selfish. Stop dressing your power in apology. The world has enough people pretending to be small. It doesn't need one more. The twist is simple. You never lost your strength. You abandoned it because it scared someone, because it cost you something, because it made you stand out when all you wanted was to belong. But belonging built on betrayal is not connection. It's captivity. So no one made you weak. You just stopped being honest about how powerful you actually are. And the moment you admit that, the paralysis begins to break. You're not exhausted from work. You're exhausted from living against yourself. You wake up tired. You go through the day tired. You lie in bed tired. But it's not your body that's drained. It's your soul. You think you're overworked, overwhelmed, overcommitted. But the real weight isn't what you're doing. It's what you're avoiding. You're not exhausted because you've done too much. You're exhausted because you've spent too long being someone you're not. The fatigue that doesn't go away with sleep has nothing to do with effort. It has everything to do with misalignment. You show up in rooms you don't belong in. You say yes when you mean no. You agree to stay silent when your truth is screaming inside. You perform. You please. You adjust your tone, your pace, your presence just to keep things smooth. And then you wonder why your energy is leaking. It's not work that drains you. It's the constant war between who you are and who you pretend to be. There's a kind of tiredness that no amount of rest can cure, a kind that comes from disconnection. Disconnection from your instincts, from your needs, from your why. And Nietzsche understood that better than most. He said, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." When you have a reason that burns through your chest, obstacles don't disappear, but they stop mattering. Pain becomes fuel, delay becomes strategy, criticism becomes background noise. But when you don't have that why, everything hurts. Every demand feels like an attack. Every task feels like a trap. Without a why, you drift. You become easy to manipulate, easy to discourage, easy to use. You work jobs you hate for people you don't respect. You scroll for hours to escape a life you never chose. You compare yourself to people you don't even know, trying to measure up to standards you never agreed to. And in the process, you forget not just what you want. You forget who you are. That's how society wins. Not by force, by distraction. It keeps you busy. It keeps you anxious. It feeds you just enough dopamine to keep you numb, but never enough clarity to make you dangerous. You get addicted to the cycle. Work, distract, complain, repeat. And meanwhile, your real life, the one you were meant to live, sits untouched beneath the noise. This isn't a productivity issue. It's a sovereignty issue. It's not that you can't get things done. It's that nothing you're doing feels connected to anything real. You've become a machine running someone else's program, and the glitch in that system shows up as burnout. But it's not the tasks that break you. It's the meaninglessness behind them. The irony is that you work harder than ever before, but for what? To maintain a version of yourself that doesn't even satisfy you. To keep proving something to people who wouldn't notice if you disappeared tomorrow. You call it discipline, but it's not. It's survival. And there's a moment when survival turns into self-erasure. When you realize you haven't made a real choice in years. You've only reacted, adapted, submitted. You've confused movement with direction, but they're not the same. You can run in place for a decade and still feel lost. So if you're tired, look closer, not at your schedule, at your alignment. Ask yourself, when was the last time you did something that felt like truth? When was the last time your work lit you up instead of wearing you down? Because the real signal that you've lost sovereignty isn't burnout. It's that quiet numbness that follows you even into rest. That feeling that no matter how much you stop, you're still not free. And that feeling is the first sign, the first whisper, that you are no longer in command of your own life. The way you speak teaches the world how to treat you. The words you choose are not just sounds, they are signals. Every maybe tells the world you don't trust your own decisions. Every sorry for something that didn't need an apology teaches others that your presence is a disruption. Every I don't know when you do know tells them you'd rather be invisible than misunderstood. And slowly, the world listens. It takes your words as instructions. It begins to treat you exactly the way you've been speaking about yourself. This is not about being loud. It's about being clear. It's about removing the fog from your voice and replacing it with precision. Nietzsche never whispered. His language cut like steel. It didn't beg. It didn't soften, and it declared, not with volume, but with certainty. Because certainty doesn't shout and it doesn't need to. It just stands, and that presence alone forces the room to adjust. Most people don't realize how much power they bleed through their speech. They qualify everything they say. They explain before anyone asks. They make themselves small just to keep others comfortable. And in doing so, they lose command before they even begin. But your language is not isolated. It's part of a system of posture, breath, and presence. The way you sit speaks, the way you walk speaks. The way you inhale before you answer that speaks too. You cannot fake clarity. You either are aligned or you are not, and your body always tells the truth before your mouth does. If your shoulders are collapsed, if your eyes avoid contact, if your tone is hesitant, your words are already muted. Not because they lack truth, but because they lack weight. And people don't respond to truth alone. They respond to truth delivered with command, with posture, with control. This isn't about arrogance, it's about ownership. It's about making your thoughts so real within you that by the time they reach the air, they are already unshakable. When you speak from that place, that you don't need to convince anyone. The energy does it for you. But most people never reach that state because they are still filtering everything through fear. Fear of judgment, fear of rejection, fear of being too much. So they dilute their truth until it's flavorless, until it can't offend, but also can't inspire. And in that safety, they disappear. Nietzsche believed your words should not reflect what is polite. They should reflect what is real. And sometimes reality is sharp. Sometimes it cuts. But if your words can't cut through noise, they will never reach the people who need to hear them. They will float. They will fade. And eventually they will be forgotten. So speak clearly and without apology, and without explanation, and without trying to be liked. Your voice is not a performance. It is an anchor. Use it to hold yourself steady in a world that wants you drifting. And if that sounds intense, it should. Because the world doesn't respond to people who speak carefully. It responds to people who speak like they mean it. But here's the deeper truth. You can't speak with power if you've given it away to your pain. You can't show up with presence if you're still carrying the weight of a story that tells you you're broken. Because language reflects belief, and belief comes from identity. So the real shift doesn't start with your words. It starts with what you call yourself. And if what you call yourself is still tied to your wounds, then no matter how strong your tone is, your spirit will still be asking for permission. Don't turn pain into identity, turn it into fuel. Pain is real, but worshiping it is a choice. Nietzsche never denied suffering. He simply refused to make it sacred. In his view, pain was not a place to live. It was a forge, a necessary fire that refines, not defines. Yet in today's world, we've been taught to treat our wounds like trophies. We wear them, we showcase them, we build our identity around them and call it authenticity. There is a strange seduction in self-pity. It feels like comfort. It feels like truth. But it's a trap. It keeps you in a loop, a narrative where you are always the injured party, and the world is always unfair. You keep repeating your story, not because you want to heal, but because you've built your self-worth around how much you've suffered. And every time someone validates that pain, the loop tightens. This is trauma identity. The idea that what hurt you is now who you are. It's subtle. It hides under language like survivor, empath, misunderstood. But what it really means is this. You've decided that what happened to you is more important than what you choose to become. And Nietzsche wouldn't accept that. Not for a second. To him, pain was not a reason to pause life. It was a reason to push harder. The moment you turn suffering into a story you need others to hear, you lose the power that suffering was meant to unlock. Because pain is not a message, it's a material. And like any raw material, it's useless unless transformed. You are not powerful because you overcame your past. You are powerful because you no longer need to talk about it. That's the twist. True strength is silent. It doesn't perform and it doesn't explain. It radiates quietly, unshakably. When people ask who you are, and your first instinct is to talk about what broke you, that is not healing. That is identity addiction, and the world will encourage it. It will reward your softness, nor it will flood you with sympathy, but none of that will build you. It will only keep you comfortable in your pain. You don't need more comfort. You need clarity. You need to look at everything you've survived and say, that happened. It hurt, but it's done. And then you need to move forward like you have nothing to prove and everything to protect. Nietzsche believed in transmutation, the ability to take chaos and turn it into structure, to take despair and turn it into direction, to take what tried to destroy you and make it irrelevant. That's not repression, that's responsibility. Your scars are not your personality. They are proof that you were tested, but they don't get to speak for you anymore. Your future does. So stop telling your story like it's still happening. Stop looking for people to understand what you've already outgrown. The moment you stop using pain as an introduction, people will stop treating you like you need to be handled gently. Because when you speak with power, no one asks what broke you. They ask what drives you. And that's the real pivot. If you don't set your own standard now, you will live inside the low expectations that your pain created. You will let your past decide your worth. And that's not survival. That's surrender. If you don't set the standard, you will live by the standard of the weak. There is no freedom without self-defined standards. Nietzsche never admired the flawless. He admired the self-directed, the ones who carved out a path with no map, the ones who stopped waiting for the world's permission and wrote their own rules. Not out of rebellion, out of necessity. Because when you don't decide who you are, the world will do it for you. It will hand you templates. It will feed you roles. It will give you a script, polished and safe. And all it asks in return is that you stay silent about your truth. But a strong man doesn't follow someone else's script. He doesn't ask for the spotlight. He becomes the reason the room pays attention, not by volume, not by force, by alignment. His values are not borrowed. His decisions are not outsourced. He knows exactly what he stands for and, more importantly, what he refuses to tolerate. That clarity is rare because most people are not living by choice. They're living by default. They've absorbed the standards of others. Family, friends, trends, culture. And they carry those invisible expectations like weights on their shoulders. They work jobs they don't believe in. Stay in relationships that drain them. Smile through situations that insult them. And they wonder why life feels heavy. It's not the load that breaks them. It's the lack of alignment. You're not supposed to carry someone else's standards. You're supposed to write your own. Ask yourself the question that most avoid. What standard am I actually living by, not what you say you believe? What you tolerate? What you accept? What you excuse? What you allow to continue in your space, in your habits, in your inner dialogue? That's your true standard, and if you can't answer that clearly, you're not leading your life. You're reacting to it. Nietzsche didn't care how perfect you looked. He cared how real you were. He respected the man who refused to lie to himself, the man who chose solitude over submission, the man who would rather walk alone with conviction than be carried by crowds with no spine. To live by your own standard is not easy. It's not safe. It's not clean. It's messy. It's costly. You will be misunderstood. You will lose people. You will be called selfish, arrogant, cold. But none of that matters. Because when you finally live in alignment, something else replaces the noise piece. Not the kind of peace that comes from being left alone, the kind that comes from no longer abandoning yourself. And the world will feel that. People won't know why, but they'll sense it. Your posture will shift. Your tone will sharpen. Your silence will start to carry weight, not because you've become aggressive, but because you've stopped being available to weakness, in others, in yourself, in the systems that once kept you tame. That's the real you, the one who doesn't flinch at discomfort, the one who doesn't need applause, the one who stands tall even in rooms that try to shrink him. So build that standard, write it down, speak it, live it, and never negotiate it. Not for money, not for love, not for belonging. Because the moment you do, you're no longer leading, you're following. And you didn't come this far to go back. Guard your new standard like your life depends on it, because it does.